Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the 2017 Textile Clothing and Fashion CSEC paper. Hopefully this is helpful, and if it is, you let me know, leave a comment and like. All right, so let's get right into it. The first question. The first question has to do with textiles, fibers, etc. All right, the first question asks us to define elasticity and resiliency. All right, and if you would have come across these words before, you would know that they are properties of fibers. And before we go into the definition, I just want to share with you a few other properties of fibers that you probably would have come across, like acid base resistance, length of the fiber, durability, luster, which is also referred to as shine, absorbency, elasticity, and resistance to temperature. There are a few others, but these are just a few common ones, right? So elasticity, when you think about it, you're thinking about stretching, right? But the term really means the ability of your fiber to stretch and return back to its original shape. So if something stretches and does not return to its original shape, then it's not elastic. All right, so that's the ability for a fiber to stretch and return to its original shape after doing so. Resiliency is the ability for fabric to retain or regain its original shape or structure after being distorted. And it can be distorted by heat, chemicals, um, abrasion. There's a whole lot of things that we do to our fabric or our clothing on a daily basis. And in order to maintain some form of durability or some form of structure, your fabric has to be resilient. And if you think about it, resiliency is something that is a human characteristic as well. So if you think along those lines, you have an idea of what it is. All right, so that was 2 marks. Moving on, we are asked to identify each of the fibers shown in the microscopic longitudinal views below. Fiber A happens to look a lot like a human hair strand, if we are being completely honest. I remember this because I used to look at a lot of hair commercials, and when they zoom up on, the strand of hair, whether it's before or after that particular shampoo that they're advertising, it looks a lot like this. And if you think about it, a sheep is a mammal, so it has quite a similar hair structure to that of humans. All right. So right away, I'm looking at this kind of overlapping scales image on a strand, and I can tell you right away it is the hair of a sheep, which is wool. All right. So fiber A is wool. Fiber B looks a bit like something that's flat and twisted. And just from the description of a microscopic image of cotton, you would know that cotton tends to look like twisted ribbons. So fiber B is cotton. Right. So we have cotton, we have linen. Linen looks a lot like bamboo in a way, if we're being honest. This is what wool looks like. Even though it was a drawing, you can tell that these overlapping scales is what they were trying to achieve in that image there, right? You also have silk, as you know, that comes from a worm. It's a protein fiber, meaning that it comes from an animal. Yeah. Cotton and linen would be cellulose fibers because they come from plants, right? We have rayon, which is regenerated. This, I'm not sure. It looks like spaghetti compressed together. We also have nylon. Nylon looks a bit dotted to me, and we have polyester, which looks like I don't know, Play-Doh, Play-Doh rolled into a cylinder, and we also have spandex, which looks a little bit like rubber bands. All right, so you just get acquainted with what you think these fibers look like, have a visual image in your head as to what they look like, so that when you see it, you're able to identify it. All right, so let's go back to our next question. So we've named fiber A and fiber B. Now we're asked to name two non-technical tests used to identify fibers in the textile lab. There are two types of tests when it comes to identifying fibers. You can either do preliminary tests or confirmatory tests. And as the name suggests, preliminary would be what you do initially. That's why it tends to be non-technical. So when you see they use the term non-technical, you know we're talking about preliminary tests. Your preliminary tests would be things like visual tests, meaning that you look at the fabric or you look at the fiber and you can tell, okay, this probably looks like cotton, so maybe it is cotton. Tactile test means that you feel the fabric, right? So you engage in touching the fabric, and if it feels like that particular fabric slash fiber, then you know it's probably that. Also, we have the flame test, which is not as straightforward. I say this because you have to know what results you're looking for, meaning that I can open a flame on a strand of fiber or a couple fiber strands, and if I don't know what I'm looking for, I would not know what this fiber or fabric is. So when we've done this before, I would ask my students to make sure you have an idea of what your results would be like or what it would look like. So say, for example, when you open a flame on cotton fibers, it tends to not shrink away from the flame. It burns readily. It has the sense of the smoke has a sense of burning paper, and that of course is because it's a cellulose fiber as well. Um, it's the ashes are feathery, they're light and feathery. So they're different characteristics or they're different observations that you're looking for. So if you don't know them, you might not be able to identify the fabric using this method. But it is also a preliminary method that is non-technical, meaning it doesn't require any major machinery, tools, etc. All right. So these are your three preliminary tests. And if you mention any two of those, you will secure your 2 marks. All right. So apart from non-technical tests or preliminary tests, like I said before, you have your confirmatory tests. And these are just to ensure that whatever fiber you think it is, that is essentially what it is. So we have our chemical solubility. This is where you use certain chemicals like sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, acetone as well. There could be a few others, but these are a few that I'm aware of. And you would dissolve the fibers in, let me not say dissolve. You will place the fibers in the chemicals, and based on how it reacts to the chemical, you would know what fiber it is. Also, we have the microscopic test, meaning that you take a few fibers, placed on the microscope, placed on a slide under a microscope, and based on what you see, you will know what fiber it is. So this also requires you to know what you're looking for, because for example, in the second section of this question, you see we had microscopic images. If you do not know what you're looking for, then you would not be able to say, well, okay, this is cotton or this is linen or this is silk or whatever the case is. So it's important for you to know what you're looking for, right? So our microscopy and chemical solubility are confirmatory tests, okay? And this is also technical because it requires some level of machinery or expertise in the area. Suggest one suitable method for the fabric construction that could be used for each of the following. There are 4 main types of fabric construction that you look at this level or at the beginner level. Most commonly, we have weaving. Most of the fabric that you encounter at the beginner level is woven fabric because you tend not to work with other types of fabric until you become a little more skilled in the manipulation of fabrics. Your weaving fabric, you can notice it by the interlacing of your warp and weft threads. I always try to remind my students of these terms. Warp goes downward, weft goes across. And a simple way to remember it is that the P on the warp points downward, and with the weft, you can look at the T, and the T goes across. So that's a simple way to remember the directions of these threads, and then the selvage is at the edge. All right, so woven fabric tends to be really common. Knitted fabric, it is also a method of fabric construction, but this is not interlacing. This is the looping of your yarns, right? So whereas with weaving, your yarns are placed over, under, over. With knitting, it's actually looped. So it tends to have a bit of a stretch because of that, because once you have the loops, you can pull it apart, put it back together. And this could be done manually as well as commercially. So things like your jerseys and your socks, certain vests and so on, they tend to be knitted. All right. We have bonded fabric. Bonding is actually matching your fabric together, your fibers together using an adhesive material. And an excellent example of bonding that we happen to see, we have started to see more as of recently, is your reusable shopping bags, the soft ones. So if you look really closely, it's like fabric, but it's not really. It's like woven. It looks like regular fabric, but it's not really regular fabric. If you look closely, it looks like fibers matched together. So um, this is an example of fabric that has been bonded, right? Then you have felting, which is similar, but it is pressed together with moisture. Your fibers are pressed together with moisture, heat, and friction, meaning at the end, it is a bit more durable than your bonded fabric. Um, I have tried to rip it apart before, and it's not as easy as with bonded fabric, right? So these are your four main fabric construction methods. And if we look at a men's dress shirt, I believe that you're going to be looking for something that's solid, um, firm enough, still wearable, comfortable. So woven fabric would be the best in this scenario. A decorated pin cushion. Generally, you would tend to use felt to create pin cushions. Actually, I just recently, the other day, saw a really pretty decorated pin cushion made of felt. All right, a disposable hand towel, bonded material or bonded fabric. Simply because most wipes and stuff that I've seen tend to be bonded. So if you know if you can visualize this disposable hand towel, you're most likely visualizing a piece of bonded fabric in your head. Also, a pair of bicycle shorts or a pair of cycle shorts. Think about the fact that you want to be comfortable when you're wearing cycle shorts. It's active wear, so it's gonna have a little bit of stretch. So right away, you know we're talking about knitted fabric. All right, there you get your 4 marks. So we can move on now. Explain 3 factors that should be considered when selecting fabric for making uniforms for primary school children in the Caribbean. If you look at some of the points in the question, we're talking about uniforms, we're talking about primary school children, we're talking about the Caribbean. Right away, well, for the Caribbean at least, one of the factors you want to consider is the climate or what the weather is like, right? So you would not go buying something that is not suitable for the weather or the climate. So that's one factor that you can consider. Um, the fact that you said primary school children, you're considering the age of the wearer. You're considering the fact that okay, these are children. You want to make sure that this fabric is appropriate because their comfort is called into question. When we're talking primary school children, we want to make sure that the fabric is comfortable. We want to make sure that the fabric could withstand whatever activities they're going to be engaged in. The fact that the fabric would have to be washed weekly or regularly, however often it's being washed, there has to be some form of durability in there as well. So that's the second thing you want to consider, the age of the wearer. And um, it's for uniform purposes. And now the fact that it's a uniform, you want to consider personal comfort. So because this is something they're going to be wearing every day, they might play, jump, hop, run around, whatever. You want to make sure that it's something comfortable. So personal comfort is also something you want to consider. So just to recap, we have the climate or the weather that these children are in, right? The age of the wearer, because it would not be nice to get fabric that is not age appropriate, comfortable for children of that age, and um, personal comfort, because if it's going to be worn every day, that's a uniform. You want to make sure that it is suitable for a child to be wearing. on a daily basis. Yeah.